Again, testing 1, 2, 3. Welcome to tonight's ASE webinar on practical ways to manage time for ASE test taking. And just looking for some feedback here through the questions pane. All right, getting a little bit of feedback now that people can hear okay. Just want to make sure. All right, we still got people that are straggling in here. I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And again, for tonight's webinar titled A Test of Time, Practical Ways to Manage Your Time for ASE Test Taking. Tonight we'd like to discuss time and ways to manage it. When taking an ASE computer-based test, you need to manage your time so it's used as effectively as possible on each and every question. While there's really no bag of tricks for this, there are some good common sense methods you can use to get the upper hand on time management when it counts at the test center. Just so you know, tonight's event is being recorded for review at a later date and time, so keep that in mind. Now let's go through tonight's webinar team. First, let me introduce you to Don Du, tonight's moderator. Don will help manage your questions in this virtual arena to help keep things on track. Don's also a great resource on the ASE program and can help with questions. Next, I'm pleased to introduce Julie White, who's not pictured here tonight, from ASE Customer Service. She's here for the specifics on some of your questions about the ASE program. Finally, I'd like to express my personal welcome and thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Dave Kappert, and I'm tonight's webinar presenter. Let's take a minute now just to go over the online interface. First, make sure your speakers are turned on and set to a comfortable listening level. We already did an audio check. People seem to be hearing okay. The content of the presentation is going to be in a viewer window shown on your left, and although you won't be able to speak directly with us on this end, you can enter your questions in the questions box on the control panel. And you can see the questions box where it's circled there with the gray oval. We invite your participation during tonight's session to make it as interactive as possible. We'll handle your questions at convenient commercial breaks during the event, but by all means pop them in the questions box so we can get to them when able. All right, everyone hear me okay and able to see my screen? Okay. I want to talk just a moment here about mobile devices. We continue to have a larger and larger percentage of webinar attendees using these devices, but I want to mention a few things about them. While they certainly offer convenience, they also come with a few compromises. On Apple, iOS, and Android devices, you can communicate via the chat function. As I showed earlier, it won't look like that on your Android device, but there is an icon to chat with us. The only exception to this is when we get the polling questions. You cannot answer polling questions on either iOS or Android devices. And if you don't yet have that specific app, you need to either go to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store to get that app. Okay, now during these events, we always have a couple of polls. And I'd like to share the first of two polls with you. So we're wondering, as a test candidate, which category do you fall into? So please vote if you can. I'll wait just, I don't know, about another 30 seconds or so to watch this. Just a few more you here. Please be patient with me. Just want to see the sample as best that I can. All right, again, since we've got a percentage on portable devices, I'm not going to be able to get everyone, so I'm just going to go ahead and close that poll there, and I'm going to share the results with you. And there you can see that not quite an even split, but kind of a break down the middle. So I'm hoping that regardless of whether you've taken a CBT test or not, that you'll find some of the information tonight here helpful for you. Okay, so let me hide that. And then let's just move on here. So as an overview of the content for tonight's short but hopefully helpful webinar, we'll look at just the realities of time tests, talk just a little bit about test preparation, the ASE question types, and go over a little bit about the computer-based testing interface. And just to qualify that, the interface I will be discussing tonight is the one that's found at most of the Prometric centers. ASE does have, through that Prometric network, some satellite centers, and that will look slightly different than what you're going to see tonight. The functionality is very similar, but it will not look like what you're going to see tonight. And then we'll take your questions later. I mean, obviously, if a question comes to mind, please enter them into the questions pane. We may not address them immediately. We'll just have to see how that goes. But by all means, please enter them, and we appreciate your patience if we're not able to get to your question right away. Okay, the realities of time tests are, and maybe this first point sounds a little trivial to some, but time's a constant. That's just the way it is. You better accept it because you just can't change it. The only thing you can learn how to do is learn how to manage and do more with it. And that's what we're here for tonight. Time tests are necessary due to the fact that ASE pays for seat time for each test. To strike a good balance between cost and convenience, ASE designates test times based off actual test performance. And now one other thing I just wanted to add to the seat time is that the times that ASE does select are based on the fact that the overwhelming majority could successfully finish the test during the time that's allocated with that. Okay? Randomized test servings. I'm bringing that up because if you go in during an ASE testing appointment and have randomized, or I'm sorry, you have multiple tests, what you're not going to be able to control is which test you are going to get first. And so, you know, like the old days when people took tests, they got an allocation of time, went in, and they were able to decide on their own which test they might want to take first during that test session. That's no longer the case on CBT. They serve up what you get. It's almost sort of like the old button on the old vending machine where you kind of take a chance. I mean, I don't mean to make it that you're taking a chance on an ASE certification test, but the reality is you don't really have a choice of what you're going to take first. Okay, and I just want to mention breaks quickly here, and that is if you're going to go into a testing appointment and say you're taking multiple tests and you want to take a break during testing, what ASE recommends that you do is, let's say you finished your first test, before you push the start button to move on to your second test, that's when you want to take your break. You don't want to be taking a break when the clock is running on your test. So can't stress that enough. Okay, now when it comes to test preparation, you really want to be prepared as possible for the test you're scheduled to take. Lack of preparation translates into doubt about the test content, which means you're going to spend more time on questions or maybe even guessing at questions. Your best first step you can make on the path to test preparation is to review the study guides for the ASE test you're going to take. You can download all the study guides for the ASE tests at ase.com/studyguides, and there will be a resource page at the bottom, as well as if you look on the screen, you will see the URL for where our study guides are. Each content area breaks down into specific tasks, which serve as the framework for the ASE test questions. Familiarizing yourself with this framework helps you initiate the right path to preparation. By comparing what's in your head with the defined tasks, you can get a pretty good idea of where to best direct your test preparation efforts. And And a suggestion we always make is please be honest with yourself as you go through the process, because that's going to indicate to you, when you're honest with yourself, of where you need to brush up, allocate time towards training in whatever form it may be, so that your time is well spent. Okay, very quickly, on screen I have a grab here of what the A1 test specifications and task list looks like. I didn't choose this for any special reason, but it does typify what's really in the study guides for any one of the ASE exams. And you see that we have content areas, questions in the test, the percentage of the tests that are reflected, so you know how the content is allocated. That's important for one thing, how many and the percentage that it represents. And then each one of the content areas is broken down into specific tasks that the questions are written around. And that's important to know that, because that's really what you're going to face when you go in and take the test. So again, this is more of that framework I suggest that you use when you get your training information, training materials, whatever form it comes in. This is really the structure you want to use to help prepare yourself for the test. Another thing I want to talk about is the different types of ASE question types that are used on ASE tests. We have the direct completion style, the Tech A, Tech B, and accept least likely style. And of course, all of these, regardless of the three styles that they are all 4-option multiple choice questions. On your screen, you see an example of a direct completion question. I'm not going to read it to you, but it typically asks you a question, and then you choose one of the answers that you feel best suits that. So you're going to choose the most likely answer. You want to rule out those that are obviously wrong. So that's what a direct completion question looks like. Just a little later, too, in our resources section, I'm going to pass on to you a test-taking tips little tutorial that you can guide yourself through to get even more familiar with these question styles, where you can actually try some of the questions and rule out the various distractors, and again, acquaint yourself with the questions a little bit more to make them more familiar. Then the Tech A, Tech B question, there's two independent statements that are being made. Okay? Now, those two independent statements by Tech A and Tech B are exactly that. They're independent statements, but they're not intended to be posed as an argument. That's not what that's about. It's just really their statements, and then ruling out, the logic of one over the other, or perhaps both. So you really look at it from the standpoint as which is most correct, or both correct, or maybe neither one of them is correct. Okay, now moving on to the accept least likely question. This type of question usually begins with a statement made right up front. And you find your answer by using a process of elimination, but again, it's an exception to, or the least likely to cause it. So these are a little bit of a shift of gears, if you will, over the other types of questions. So you need to keep that in mind when you're evaluating these types of questions. And again, I mentioned the interactive tutorial. I'll give you that link here in just a little bit, and I encourage you to spend a little bit of time with it. All right, now I am going to move into, let's just, given the scenario that you are at an ASE test center and you are actually facing the questions on a live exam, I'm going to just give you a little bit of a methodology here. This is not really a per se way that ASE says that you have to answer the questions, but it just might add a little bit of logic to how you approach them. So, if you feel confident about the answer, select it and move on. Again, that's for a question that you've evaluated and you're confident about it. Choose the answer, move on. If you're doubtful about an answer selection, select the best one and then flag the question and move on. And again, I'll show you that in just a minute. And then the third approach, if you're completely unsure, leave it unanswered and move on. Notice that each one of these has the words move on so that you continue to move through the test. Okay, now, before I launch the poll, let me just skip out of here real quick, and I'll give you the link to this too as this is loading up. This is ASE CBT test drive. Again, this reflects the type of interface you are going to see at most of the Prometric centers. Again, the exception are some of the satellite centers, which will have similar functionality but a different look to them. And I am going to go skip right into the questions. You are all welcome to poke around with this little widget that we have on our website to your heart's content, to help you familiarize yourself. So let's say on this first question here, we look at it, and for the sake of the demonstration, I'm not sure I'm going to pass by. I'm just going to move right on. Next one. I look at this one, and after I've evaluated, maybe I think the best answer is D, but I'm not sure, so I flag it. And then I move on. Next question. Go through it. Maybe similar. That I think is the right answer, but I'm going to flag it. I move on. This question, I'm not sure. I move on. And now here, I'm confident that that's the answer. Not that I made the right selection, but just for the sake of this demonstration. But notice what you get are 3 columns of categorized questions. So you can look at it this way in your methodology. The answered questions, if you use the methodology that I recommend of going through them and saying I'm confident that that's answered, I might want to look at it as apportioning the least amount of my remaining time towards these because I feel I got these correct. The unanswered questions could represent those that I need to spend the most amount of time on evaluating to go through those. And flagged would be next in line from there, that I chose an answer, I'm not quite sure, I may want to review them. Just remember that every question, if you answer it, you always got a chance of answering it to get it right. It's kind of the Wayne Gretzky analogy. You miss 100% of the shots you never take. Since the Stanley Cup just finished, I thought I'd throw that in. But maybe this is some way to approach it by using this review screen, and then you can go back to your questions and you can make choices one at a time, popping back and forth to the review screen, going back to your questions, answering, review, or going through them in a linear style. Again, keeping your eye on the clock in terms of what you have for remaining time. That's one of the suggestions that we make, at least in terms of managing time on the ASE test through the CBT interface. And again, if you put your hands on this little widget that we have available, play around with it a little bit, and maybe you'll become a little bit more familiar with it, so that it starts to set in that that could be an ally for you when you go into the test center. Now, quickly, what I want to do is just I'm going to go ahead and launch the second poll of tonight. And we just want to see if that could be of any help towards you. Okay, I'm just going to wait for a few more people to vote. Just about there. All right, it's about 80% I think we had. So that little trick looks like it might be helpful for some of you folks out there as you take an ASE test on CBT. I'm going to to go ahead and I'm going to hide that poll. And I'm going to go ahead and, as I said before, move on. Okay, with that, I'm not sure what we've got for questions over in the organizer window. What's on people's mind out there? I'll go ahead and I'll pop up that resource page here just so that everybody can see. I see one of the questions we have is how much time for each test. The answer to that is they vary. That is printed on your admission ticket. It's also available in several spots on the ASE website that specifies. And I see, can you build time on your next test? That's sort of like carryover. Julie's working on that one right now. And did the test time change from paper tests? Yes, the time did change, because on the paper test there was just a session. You could take them during that appointment, and again you could allocate them the way you want. Now we have a per test time window that's established for each and every test that you take. You know, Don and Julie are working in the chat window right now in terms of offering some specifics on some of the specific time questions we have. Just fired off a resource link to everybody so you can get some of those resources on our website. The test taking tips, the CVT test drive. Julie and Don are still working on some of the questions in the question pane. Let's see, we have a few questions here on study guides. Just want to mention that all of the study guides are available on the ASE website for download. And we keep those updated with the latest available. Also want to briefly mention that any of you that are looking at registering for a test and scheduling testing appointments, that's done through My ASE, and you can find that right off registration or right off ASE.com. And you also find under the About ASE and then My ASE there are some demos there, tutorials if you will, that guide you through how to create a My ASE account, how to register technicians for it, either yourself or those if they're under your employee type of situation, under a company account manager scenario, appointment scheduling. Those are on the ASE site as well to, again, try to make things easier for you. Okay, looking to see if there's any last minute questions coming in here yet. See, one of the questions we get here, and we do get this question often, not just in tonight's webinar, but is which is a better study guide or textbook? And I mean, that's one of those things that's really the industry creates all kinds of training materials. There's books, study guides, lots of different types of online things that help people prepare for the ASE exams. None of those are ours, so what we recommend that you do is again, we showed the content areas and task lists. Compare that to what you're looking at, either using, purchasing, considering, whatever context you want to put it in, and find out when it was last updated. Make sure it's current material. But again, it should be designed, again, around the framework that we talked about earlier. Okay, one of the questions that's appeared is how many years before you have to renew your ASE? ASE certifications are good for 5 years. And that is the case across all the ASE certifications currently. The exception to that, which really is not a certification per se by ASE designation, but that's our Section 609 refrigerant recovery and recycling program for mobile air conditioning systems. That at this point does not have a requalification period attached to it. That could change as the regs are expected to change when EPA comes out with its latest information related to HFO 1234YF and how it's going to affect service technicians in terms of service procedures and those sorts of requirements. Saw a question here about can we take multiple practice tests. I believe you are talking about the ASE practice tests that we have off our site. Those have one form. I mean, you could take multiples, but it really has one form, one array of questions on it. Okay, everybody, I mean, that concludes my presentation. Welcome to hang around here for a few more minutes. As far as getting your questions answered, it looks like we're paring those down to just a few left now. The G1 has a 1-year experience requirement, but it's a 5-year certification, same as the others, just to be clear about that. And one other footnote I'll just add on the experience requirement is that ASE has gone to, we've always historically had the 2-year experience requirement for regular certifications. Now with G1 we have a 1-year experience requirement. The regular certifications remain at 2, but for advanced level tests like L1 and L2 it is now 3 years experience requirement for those advanced level. Once again, everybody, here's the resources on the ASE website that we think could be helpful to you. Whether they be familiarizing yourself with the whole CBT process, whether you're in the preparation phase of it, working with the ASE questions, that sort of thing. Don, I want to go over to you for a minute and just see if there's anything you can call to my attention as far as questions or anything else we need to address.
Okay, Dave, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay. Yeah, no, it looks like most of the questions that have come in have been answered either directly back through Julie and myself or through your discussion here. I had one question here that I can't answer. I don't know the answer to it, but I'm sure it's on our website. It's, do you have to have A8 and A6 completed before you take L1? I know there's just been some changes to the prerequisites for L1, but I don't recall what they are. Do you know? Or
Let's turn that one over to Julie, make sure we give them the right answer.
okay. But otherwise, I think most of the questions have been answered. I think that that interface that replicates the interface for the testing that you went through is going to be very helpful to kind of see what they expect when you get to the test center. The other thing that I think is real helpful that's on our website is a little widget of how to analyze an ASE test question, how to break down each question and analyze it. That's worth spending 5 minutes on in your review. Again, I think the only thing that kind of affects people sometimes on their first experience at the test center is they're unprepared for the level of security and check-in through the check-in process now. I know that that's some of the feedback we've gotten. It's much more like going through TSA when you go in, you show your ID, and they have a little locker for you to put your personal items and cell phones and that sort of stuff in. So when you go in the test center, it's just you and what you bring in your mind into the test center. And of course, everything's secure in a locker, so you don't have to worry about that. So that, like I say, is a little take back for those people who are used to going to paper pencil testing. But again, the reason for that is that they're testing more than just automotive technicians. Prometric test all different types of professions. So someone sitting next to you might be taking a CPA exam or something like that. I don't know if that's the exact one, but maybe taking other types of professional credentialing exams. So they have to take care of it for everybody here. Of course, Dave's demonstrating right now on the screen that little widget for how to analyze a test question. I think that's one of the best things they put on the screen for help for new guys that haven't taken a test yet. Okay. And that's about all I have, Dave, that I've seen coming in.
Okay, real good. Thanks again, everyone, for attending tonight. It's been a pleasure hosting this webinar. We hope that you've gotten something out of it and will benefit you in your endeavors towards ASE test taking. One thing I just want to remind everybody of is if you go to the ASE website and go in the, I believe it is in the, I'll go right there right now to make sure I've got this all straight. Test prep and training, news and events, multimedia. News and events, multimedia. You will see that we have a listing of some different multimedia things here, but most importantly, we have the recorded ASE webinar sessions to date that we have done. So the one that you're attending right now will be archived shortly for those people that couldn't attend. It will end up on here as well. But some of the test preparation stuff I've abbreviated in tonight's presentation. We had some earlier ones we did on testing 1, 2, 3, 3 key elements of ASE test preparation, questions, anyone, how to analyze them, to get into that a little bit more in depth. There was a separate webinar on that. So we offer that to you, again, in the spirit of trying to help you prepare for the ASE tests as best as possible. Again, it's been a pleasure having you here tonight. So for Julie White, Don Dew, and myself, Dave Kappert, I want to bid you a pleasant evening, and thanks again for attending. We hope to see you real soon.